purpose of this presentation is to just try to get you familiar with all the different components of a graduate school application. It's a bit different than an undergrad application, and there's different things that can happen along the way that might make you think you're in trouble for trying to get into where you want to get into, and I'll offer some advice and solutions on sort of how to get around some of the roadblocks, bumps in the road you might run into. Kathleen said, I'm a grad assistant for the Graduate Admissions Office. I'm a third-year PhD student in the Rhetorics, Communication, and Information Design program. Don't ask me what that is, because that'll take the rest of our time for me to explain that to you. And I've been working in the Grad Admissions Office now for 4.5 years. So in that time, I've literally seen probably close to tens of thousands of applications come through. Some good, some not so good. But we'll get into that in a minute. So first thing I want to open up with, all you guys are here, so clearly you're considering going to grad school. And from what Kathleen said, we have a pretty wide variety of fields from the humanities and the sciences and engineering and across the board. But just a few reasons, why should I go to grad school? I wish somebody had told me when I was an undergrad to consider grad school. It never even entered my mind. I finished my undergrad and just went off and did what everybody thought I was supposed to do, which is get a job in the big city. I worked in New York City for 10 years at a job that I ultimately decided I despised. So after 10 years, I packed it in, moved from New Jersey to South Carolina, and came back to grad school. Not that those 10 years were a total waste of my time. I learned a lot, but my life would have been a whole lot better if I had just known right after undergrad, go straight into grad school. So why should you go to grad school? Graduate degree will absolutely help you get ahead in the workforce. As I'm sure you guys are aware, I mean, nowadays a bachelor's degree is essentially equivalent of a high school diploma. I mean, it's a minimum requirement that you're going to need to get any sort of real professional job. And everybody that you're going to be competing with for those jobs, everybody's going to have one. So if you just stick around an extra 2 years and get the master's degree, you're automatically going to position yourself to move into a higher level in the workforce, and you're also going to stand out. And personal rewards that you get. I worked in the corporate world in New York, like I said, for a decade. Never had a passion for it, never had love for it. Money was great, but after a decade of doing it, I couldn't imagine doing that for the rest of my life. So when I came back to school, my initial plan was come down to South Carolina, crank out a master's degree just to do a career change, move back to New York and do something else. But in the process of getting my master's degree, I discovered I had a passion for rhetoric and writing and philosophy and teaching, and it changed the whole trajectory of my life to this point. So how do you choose a graduate school? This is really, really important. Like Kathleen said, we would like for you to consider Clemson. We're the Clemson Graduate School, so we're going to try to push you our way. But Clemson might not necessarily be the best place for you. The thing about graduate school is it's almost entirely research focused. That's what you're going to be doing for a master's degree. If you go on to pursue a PhD, it's all research. So from the beginning, you need to start doing research right off the bat. Start using your research skills to try to figure out what the best school is going to be for you. So be realistic. Like I said, you might have your heart set on going to a big name school or a certain location, but that's not necessarily going to be the right fit for you. You really have to try to dig in and learn as much as you possibly can about any program that you might be interested in. So you want to know how long it's been around, what the faculty are, job placement rates, earning expectations, all that stuff. You want to know all that stuff inside and out for every single program that you're considering. This is also going to affect how you put your application together. And communicate with the program. Like in my capacity, basically one of the things I do for the grad school is I man an email account. I manage an email account. It's grdapp@clemson.edu. So if you guys have questions, as you start going through the application process, you can send an email. That'll come to me. I'll try to answer your questions the best I can. But it amazes me how many times students are not communicating with the program that they're applying to. I mean, they're communicating back and forth to me, but the program that they're applying to has no idea who they are before their application pops up on a computer screen somewhere. And that's not ideal. You want to let them know who you are before they see your application, because you're going to want to know what sorts of things they're looking for in the application. It's going to strongly influence the way you put things together. And you are demonstrating that you're doing research, you're doing your homework. And they'll have a name, they'll at least have a voice. It's not always possible, but if you can, try to visit. Perhaps have a face-to-face visit before you submit the application, because then there's a face and a name to all the data on a screen. And that can make a big difference too. If you're borderline and it comes down to there's one spot left, it's between you and you had the opportunity to go sit in that person's office and talk to them. This person didn't. That can give you the extra edge that might get you in. However, I do run into situations where the flip side becomes true, where people try to communicate far too much, where they're sending a program coordinator or program director, 30 emails over the course of a week, asking this, asking that. And then you're putting a face and a name to your application, but not in a good way. When your application pops up, it's, this Joe Smith guy, he's been bugging me for weeks. And you don't want to set yourself up to have a negative perception of yourself in that way before they review your application. And sell yourself. I think a common mistake people often make is they're very concerned on the front side with, okay, what's this program going to do for me? What kind of job am I going to get when I get out? How much money am I going to make? What are you going to teach me? How much work do I have to do? All that type of stuff. But at this stage of the game, you need to be trying to demonstrate to the program what you're bringing to the table to them. Once you get in, then you can start worrying about all the benefits you're going to get. But an application is precisely a persuasive argument for why they should let you in. So don't focus so much on what they're going to do for you at this point. Wait until you're a part of the program and you can start worrying about that. So funding opportunities, as we were in here setting up, these two students in the back, this was a question that they asked, and the comment came up that I thought grad school was free. It can be, sort of. At Clemson, for example, you can get a teaching assistantship through a program where you might be teaching a couple classes, you might be teaching labs. I mean, I'm sure you guys have taken classes where it was a grad student, was the instructor. You might get a research assistantship where you're working for a professor, helping them with their research, or you might find, like I did, a more administrative assistantship. I benefited greatly from having my assistantship through the grad school because most programs have a limited amount of funding for assistantships. So once a student has that assistantship, they want to push you through the program and get you out so that position is open for the next group of people coming through. The grad school, fortunately, is not like that. So I was able to, essentially, the main reason I was able to get into my PhD program without a problem is because I didn't need funding from the program. My funding was already coming from the graduate school. So even if you're not able to secure an assistantship through a particular program, you want to ask the questions, what other opportunities might be out there, because there are positions probably at every school in administrative offices all over that are grad assistants, and that gets you your tuition waiver. So at Clemson, the tuition gets waived, but you still have to pay fees and student health insurance and all that type of stuff. So for me, it comes out to be about $1,000 a semester. It costs me to go to grad school, which is not too shabby a deal. Okay, so once you've done all this, you're ready to begin the application process, but there's multiple components to a grad school application. The process. So you have obviously the application itself, which is just all your info, your transcripts. Sometimes schools require official transcripts where you'll have to order them. Usually there's a fee associated with that. Sometimes it's just unofficial. Again, at Clemson, for example, for the application, we just need an unofficial transcript. So you can go into iRoar, take a screenshot, or just download your unofficial transcripts and upload them right to the application. Once you're offered admission, then you're required to submit your official transcripts. Then you'd have to order them and have them sent to the graduate school. Your test scores, so GRE, GMAT, If it's law school, it could be LSAT, it could be MCATs for med school, whatever the case may be. Your letters of recommendation, your curriculum vitae is just essentially your academic resume, and statement of purpose, research agenda. And there could be also additional things. I know that young ladies thinking about a master's degree in English, they'll typically require a writing sample. Other programs may require other sorts of samples of other things. So again, when you're communicating with the program on the front end, you want to understand what they want from you. So everything gets in smoothly and your applications get processed in a timely manner. So your transcripts. Not a whole lot you can do about them, right? Your transcripts are your transcripts. They're the classes that you took. A GPA is typically a big concern for students when applying to grad school. However, that's just one part. All of these components are equally important, and there are ways to get around if you have a deficiency. Normally, a minimum would be 3.0 would be a requirement. That was not the case for me. Mine was not quite a 3.0. The 4.0 will help your chances, but it's no guarantee. Everything that you build the application with is going to influence the admissions decision that you get. So, back to me. I'd like to party a little bit when I was an undergrad. As a result, I think one semester, I joined a fraternity, and the first semester I was in the fraternity, I had two roommates. I think one got a 1.7, I got a 1.6, and the other one got a 1.5. That woke me up, and I started hitting the books again. And I pulled it back up to, I think I graduated, it was like a 2.8 or something. But within my major, it was like a 3.5. So when I met with the director of the program, I got my master's degree here in the MAPC program, the Professional Communication Program. I talked to her about that. And she just basically said, you know what, as long as in your major it's over a 3.0, that's fine. We don't care if you screwed up in gen ed classes that aren't going to be applicable to what you're going to be studying here. So that's something else you want to know about the program. So your test scores. So again, most programs have minimum GRE or GMAT score requirements. They're not cut and dry though. There's usually some flexibility, there's usually play in there. But knowing what the requirements are before you take the exam is going to influence how you prepare. I'm sure you guys know there's companies like Kaplan and Princeton Review that do GRE prep courses. So for me, I knew my math is horrible. I have a restraining order against math. It's not allowed within 100 feet of me. So I was terrified. And plus, I had been out of school for so long, I hadn't done any algebra or any type of math in a decade. So I'm like, how am I going to get past this test? So I started doing some research, and I was able to, I lived in a college town in northern New Jersey. I was able to find a retired math professor from the university in town who did GRE tutoring for math. So I met with him once a week for like 6 or 7 weeks, and he didn't teach me math. He taught me how to take the math section of the GRE, which is a big difference. He just basically showed me how to, okay, you're instantly going to be able to eliminate probably 3 out of 4 without even having to do a single math problem. I still didn't do well in the math section, but I did much better than I would have had I not gone there. And again, back to my program, because it was housed in the English department, and my communicating with the director, she told me we really couldn't care less what you get on the math section. We're just looking at your verbal skills, because that's what's important for this program. But that doesn't necessarily hold true across the board. I mean, a lot of programs in the sciences or engineering do want you to have strong verbal and writing skills because that's a big part of what they do. So you just want to know, what are you guys going to focus on? Do you care about my math? Do you care about the verbal? How do you weight it? And that way you'll know, okay, do I need to take an intensive Kaplan or Princeton Review course? How am I going to prep? How long do I need to prep? And thinking about when you're going to take the exams, this will come around to program deadlines. You need to know when the deadline is, and there can sometimes be multiple deadlines. Like at Clemson, there's programs that will have 2 deadlines. One deadline for being considered for an assistantship, and then a second drop dead deadline. So if you get your application in 1 day after that assistantship deadline passes, you're not being considered for an assistantship. You're going to have to pay full price. So you want to know when those last days are. And again, a lot of times it can be flexible. Some programs will do admission on what's called a rolling basis, which means as applications come in, they'll accept or reject them until they're full. Others will wait until they get 500 applications and then review them all at once. So you want to understand how those are done too, because if it's on a rolling basis, you know, don't wait until the deadline, because if you wait until like the day before the deadline, the program might already be full. They might have all their students already. So in that case, you want to get in as early as possible. And again, just because you might fall short of the minimum requirements does not mean you're disqualified. There's still other areas of the application where you can build a case. So if your test scores are a little low, it still doesn't hurt to try to put the application together and make it as strong as possible. So your curriculum vitae. Just essentially, you know, your academic resume. And at this point, schools know, I mean, you're coming from undergraduate programs, you're not expected to have, you know, a 6-page CV with journal article publications, conference presentations, all that sort of thing. It's going to be relatively short, but it is a place that you can use to highlight different things that you've done in your academic career. Whatever different organizations you might have been in, any leadership roles that you took, any service that you've done. If you're work on the Habitat for Humanity House on Bowman Field, that's something you would put on there. If you're playing sports, any awards, any research projects you might have done with a professor, or anything that you're particularly proud of, any recognition you might have gotten, you want to put all that on there. No, I mean, for an undergraduate student looking to go into grad school, that would be the norm. Sure, you could put work experience on it, but the way you would try to want to phrase that, you want to try to make some sort of connection between how that work experience is going to contribute or influence to what you're going to bring to the program, which, I mean, shouldn't be too difficult to do in most cases. And this isn't even a CV, this is just basically a resume, but formatting wise, you want to try to keep it simple. I saw a CV came in about 2 weeks ago. I had to upload it to a student's application, and I opened it and I couldn't believe what I saw. The entire CV was done in the font Comic Sans. Yeah, I was just like, oh, this poor kid, he doesn't have a chance. So keep in mind, I mean, all the different aspects of your application are being reflective of you. So if you do something like that, it does not reflect well. So you just want to try to make everything look professional, as formal as possible. And I would encourage you to look at your application as it's a persuasive argument. So if you think back to your English 103 days, where you had to write, you know, argumentative research papers, approach your application in that same way. Try to remember your rhetoric. So try to build your ethos as to what kind of student you're going to be, what kind of representative of that program and that school are you going to be. Okay, letters of recommendation. This can trip people up quite a bit also. They're very important. It's a place where if you have deficiencies elsewhere in the application, this can pull you up in a hurry. So if you have some professors that you particularly got along with, classes that you took that you really loved, those are the people that you want to approach to write you as strong a recommendation as possible. So choose them carefully. This happens all the time, believe it or not. People never actually inform the person that they want to write a letter for them that they've put their name down on an application. And that person just suddenly gets an email saying, you know, you've been invited to write a letter of recommendation for Mike Utley. And the professor, Mike never said anything about this. Or the professor may not even particularly like me. It's like, well, I'm not doing this. I've actually seen letters of recommendations, very rare, but I've seen a few over the past 4 years that explicitly said, under no circumstances should you allow this student into your program. I mean, clearly the student never approached the professor, never talked to them, and the professor's just like, no, this kid is one of the worst students I ever had. I have no idea why he would even request that I do this. So be careful about that. And the other thing is, professors know how letters of recommendation work. I mean, they write them every semester, every year, inside and out, but you can coach them a little bit. So if you're applying to, say, 4 or 5 different programs and you're asking a professor to write letters for you, you might want to go sit down and have a meeting with them and talk to them about the differences between those 4 or 5 programs. And you want to ask permission for this first, make sure the professor is okay with it. Most will be. If they're willing to write you a letter, they want to write you a letter, the best letter that they can. So if you can explain to them, okay, well, the program at Clemson kind of focuses on this. So you remember that project I did in your class? Could you maybe talk about that? But the program at University of South Carolina more focuses on this, and then there was that other project I did that's more applicable to that. So when they're writing their letters, they can sort of custom design them to make you look as good as possible to that particular program and that particular school. Statement of purpose is, it varies from program to program, discipline to discipline. For example, a statement of purpose for my master's degree, I think was just like maybe a short little 2-3 page paper that I wrote about why I wanted to go to graduate school, why I wanted to go to that particular program, what I wanted to do with it, what I'm bringing to the table to that program. But for my PhD program, our director on the program website has a very detailed list of questions he wanted answered, and he wanted them answered at length. So I think my statement of purpose for my PhD program came out to be 16 or 17 pages, something like that. But you want to understand what they're looking for. Some programs may have minimum length requirements and maximum length requirements. If you turn in a 16-page statement of purpose to most programs, they're going to be like, I'm not reading this. Why do they write so much? We only wanted 2 pages. So more can be less in that sense. And they may be looking for very specific things they want you to address. So going back to communicating with the program, you want to make sure that you know what they're looking for in the statement of purpose. And that is it. So now we can move to Q&A. Are there any questions? It would depend on the program. I would say it's not that uncommon for somebody to go to grad school for something sort of unrelated. There's usually some sort of connection there. Like, an English major probably isn't going to get into an electrical engineering graduate program, something like that. But yeah, people do. No, very good question. Not necessarily. Yeah, it can be an employer, somebody you worked for in the past. And with letters of rec too, you want to understand how many are required. Usually for master's degrees, 2 letters are required. For PhD programs, it's usually 3. I would advise you to give them the number that they want. A lot of students sometimes think more is better. So instead of submitting 2 letters of rec, they'll submit 4 or 5 letters of rec. If the program wanted 4 or 5, they would ask for 4 or 5. So give them what they ask for. More is not always better. So assistantships, you basically have a job in some capacity. It's usually 20 hours a week, whether you're teaching, working for a professor, working in an office like I do. But it's pretty critical that you find yourself one of those. Otherwise, grad school becomes very cost prohibitive. It becomes very expensive. But yeah, it doesn't hinder you in any way. If you're rolling in the dough and don't need an assistantship, then it would actually be easier to get into a program because you're not asking for any funding from them, and you're going to be paying full price. So like, okay, you're going to pay full price, you don't need an assistantship? Not good enough, come on in. All right, guys, thank you very much for coming. Hopefully it was informative. And grdapp@clemson.edu. If you have questions, feel free.